Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting for Wednesday, February 6th. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the Coast Salish territory, and also I would like to welcome Devin Warwick, who is our new Soils Bylaw Enforcement Officer. I'd like to introduce him. Welcome. And Devin has 27 years of experience as a self-employed general contractor, 3 years experience working as a bylaw officer for the City of Victoria, as well as over 11 years experience as a reserve constable with the Victoria Police Department, which he has been recently awarded the Sovereign Medal for Volunteers. Welcome. Moving forward with the approval of the agenda, we have 3 new business items. We have, first business item is a news release. Second business item is Mr. Farquhar to do with Parks Commissions. And the third is Director Acton with Director Function 531. So with that added to the agenda, I'm seeking an approval. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on now to the adoption of the minutes from the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of January 16th. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now to any business arising from the minutes. Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. There's no business arising.
Thank you. Moving on now to public input period. Is there anybody that wishes to address?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Madam Chair, I attended the Shawnigan Basin Society meeting last night with the Shawnigan Research Group. And we were discussing milfoil and milfoil strategies. And one person mentioned, they said there should be no problem financially because Function 488 was approved. And when I had to tell them it was approved all right, but it was approved at $0, then they weren't too happy. Madam Chair, when there's such a drastic change in something, could the CVRD not highlight this so that when people are watching from at home, that when they see something approved, that they don't think that they got all their money? It almost seems like going to read through the paper and you see 50% off something, and then you go down to the fine print, and then it says with a $200 purchase. And I know the CVRD has higher standards than that. We don't play jiggery-pokery around here. And so it would be really neat to see something happen there. The other thing is, with the Basin Society funded at $0, this is going to affect their $100,000 grant application from the federal government. And it would really be good if there was some way that they could get some funds so they could qualify for this grant and bring another $100,000 to the Shawnigan community. I just forgot what I was going to say. So, but hey, it would be nice to see better cooperation. Oh, I know what it was. When the manager from environment said she invited the Shawnigan research and not research, but the Shawnigan Basin Society to join them in this new function that's going to take place with 531, it would be good if they come along with their expertise and their money. And the other question came to mind is that the function 488, I believe, is a CVRD function. So if they come along with deficits, is the CVRD going to come good on that too? Something just to ponder about if we go through this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Is there anyone else in the gallery that wishes to make a comment? Have some input on what's on our agenda today?
I will.
Oh, great.
Do I need to press a button?
Oh, it's okay, the red light is on, you can go ahead.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name's Sarah DL from Cowichan Station, Area E. And I here to comment on the commercial marijuana grow-up application. And I guess I'll start by just saying I find it interesting that the CVRD doesn't have any more detailed policy on what this development for the financial and all the benefits that the Cowichan's going to have from these grow-ups. And I'm on the Area E OCP and APC, sorry, and we've been working on the OCP, which means this being a recent subject we got to discuss, and we understand the linkages to agricultural lands, but as the marijuana grow-ups are of a really contained, they're not actually in the soil, so we discussed how, the arable land, we didn't really want a lot of arable land used in ALR. That's sort of where we came to, and then we spoke of forestry lands, and silviculture as well uses the soil. There's a direct connection to arable land for growing, and so we didn't feel that areas devoid of trees would be the best place either. Then the discussion went on to, of course, went through everything, parks and institutional, so sure, if we want to be leaders in this kind of science and technology, there should be an institutional place for grow-ups. And then we came to commercial and industrial, and both of those maybe perhaps where things with lots of employment should go. And brownfield sites especially came up. We thought, so like there's an old cedar sawmill down in Glenora Way. What to do with that brownfield site? There's the incinerator in Area E. The landfill there. And so the other thing that I guess didn't come up that I thought of since was large operations, lots of jobs, lots of people going to work. These places should really be sited on main roads or within walking distance of a main road so that transit is more of an option. And what else shall I say? Oh, I know the site personally because I live in the area. So Riverside Road, small, windy road that needs upgrades all the time, that has increased pressure from residential use, the trestle, and logging trucks. And so, again, that just sort of made me think of where there's going to be lots of people coming and going, and deliveries and shipping. Situating these places closer to urban areas would be my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rachka.
Thank you, Sarah. There's just a few more minutes left in our public input period.
Hi there.
Hello.
My name's Lex. I'm the neighbors to the people that want to put the show in there. So same concerns, traffic, noise, road use, all these things, water use, electrical issues. You're going to have backup generators, you're going to have fuel, you're going to have more people parking, all these things are issues. I just want to make sure that everybody's looking at the big view on this. I understand that this is a precedent for future properties in different areas and different zonings to be able to squeak through here. What I'm kind of seeing is it's on that gray margin of like, yes, technically you can pull it off, but at the same time, you are encroaching, you are pushing that boundary into commercial or business at that next step up, which doesn't really suit our area, that's for sure. Like Sarah said, there's other places that are on main roads, farther away from residential area that would be more suitable for that kind of business. And I think in the future, that's where that department, that business should be more orientated rather than small residential area, which we are. Even though we are rural, it is a tight-knit little area, tight-knit little community. We're, you know, children and all those other things running around, so it's, yeah. One more other thing too is partially it's my fault for, I'm not here a lot of the time, I work away, but I haven't been able to source a lot of information available in front of me, like building plans, water usage, you know, disposal, all these things. I haven't really seen anything on that end of things. A lot, what I've heard is just word of mouth through neighbors and stuff. So if there's anything out there, if anybody's got some information for me, I'd love to soak it up. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'm going to ask again if there's anyone else that wishes to speak. We have 3 minutes left.
Hi, good morning. Or good afternoon, sorry. I'm listening to the different opinions and stuff. As far as I'm concerned, I believe it's a way of making growing business, and as well as being, you know, off wherever it's situated off the edge of the road. You do want to be more of a private area, kind of, so to speak. As far as children, and I mean, it's legal. It's in the streets and in the like, as far as different places to buy it and stuff in the public. So children are walking by that every day. I guess the biggest thing for just listening on the outside for myself is the fact that if it's zoned to do it, and it's zoned that there's no barriers there as far as everything else, and all this other stuff is so to speak, is taken care of, then I don't see how, if you have a property there, how, if you're within the rights of the zone, how others in the area can dictate whether or not you wanted to start something. So if other people wanted to buy property somewhere that's zoned to have a number of different farms or whatever else, that other public people can, I guess, put their opinion and make a halt on somebody that might have a good business plan and an idea to make prosper in business. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
We have 3 minutes. We have one more speaker. There's time for one more.
Hi, I guess I'll take the last spot. I'm also a neighbor of the proposed zone. I'm looking at this as a pros and cons type of scenario. I feel that there's a lot of potential cons for the direct neighbors involved. You know, noise, pollution, increased traffic, all those things are relevant to the people that are surrounding it. And I don't see a lot of benefits. In fact, I kind of look at this as a case precedence. If you give a license to an individual, it sets precedence for the people around that area to apply for a similar license, especially given the circumstances are similar. And what you could eventually do is create sort of industrialized little pockets of zoning. And in that case, you know, you've got a commercial hub out on Rosedale Road, and, you know, the neighbors themselves might not want that. They didn't buy with those intentions. So I think it's a bigger question of pros and cons, and the overall idea of city structures. Do you want industrial pockets in certain areas, or do you want them for farming and people's residential use, which might not include noisy structures around them? So, you know, that's my 2 bits, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. We're moving on now to correspondence. We have no delegations. We're moving on to C1, which is a grant and aid request from Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake, to the Malahat Lions Club, that the amount of $1,000 be provided to the Malahat Lions Club to support maintenance and upgrades to the cook car. Oh, sorry, I keep taking your job away. My apologies. It's been moved. Is there a seconder? It's been moved and seconded. I'll give you the next one. It's, any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next, C2, Mr. Blackwell, please.
Thank you. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake, in the amount of $500 be provided to Young Seniors Action Group to support the purchase of a sewing machine for the quilting group.
It's been moved. Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. We move on now to C3, a grant and aid for Cobble Hill. Mr. Blackwell.
The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, in the amount of $1,000 be provided to Francis Kelsey Secondary School for 2 bursaries for graduating students residing in Electoral Area C.
Been moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Kuhn. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on to C4, grant and aid request, Electoral Area C.
The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, in the amount of $1,000 be provided to Cowichan Secondary School for 2 bursaries for graduating students residing in Electoral Area C.
It's been moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now to C5, grant and aid Electoral Area C.
The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, in the amount of $1,000 be provided to Cobble Hill Event Society to support funding for village events.
It's been moved. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And we're moving on now to C6, grant and aid request, Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill again.
The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, in the amount of $3,000 be provided to Shawnigan Cobble Hill Farmers Institute and Agricultural Society to provide funding assistance for the 110th Cobble Hill Fair.
Been moved. Second. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now to C7, a grant and aid request, Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill.
And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, in the amount of $2,000 be provided to Shawnigan Cobble Hill Farmers Institute and Agricultural Society to provide funding assistance for the purchase of an overhead projector and drop-down screen for movie nights and matinees.
Been moved. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now to another grant and aid request from Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill.
And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, in the amount of $2,000 be provided to Malahat Lions Club to support fire suppression and code upgrades to the Lions cook car.
Been moved? Is it moved? Second. Is any discussion? Director Nicholson.
I just want to know what this cook car is.
Director Wilson, could you enlighten us with the cook car?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, the Lions operate, they call it the cook car, and basically it's a mobile galley, if you like, that moves from event to event. They don't charge anything for it. They provide a lot of burgers, anything that you can put out to the local attendees. Any money which is got from that is donated to charities through the Lions and their associated organizations.
Thank you. Is there a follow-up, Director Nicholson?
So we're in total, we're giving them $3,000 for their upgrades, I guess? There's no duplication, is there?
Because we have 2 cook car requests? One was for one thing and this is for another.
This is this is exactly the same thing. That request did come through to all three directors, as I recall, maybe even four directors. If they don't do these fire suppression and upgrade to code upgrades, then this service will die. The alternative is to buy a brand new car and convert that, which is going to cost $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. They asked for a total of $6,000, and they asked each area if they could donate $2,000 from each of the areas. And I think Area B and myself have responded with 2,000 on mine and 1,000. But the total for the upgrades is 6,000, and they were hoping to split that between the three areas.
Thank you. Going to call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on to C9, grant and aid request, Electoral Area C, Mill Bay Marine Rescue Society.
And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, in the amount of $2,000 be provided to Mill Bay Marine Rescue Society to support the replacement of their outboard engine and a boat lift and house upgrades.
Been moved. Second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now to C10, grant and aid request, Electoral Area D for a change. Cowichan Bay, Coxila School Historical Society. Mr. Blackwell.
And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, in the amount of $5,000 be provided to the Coxila School Historical Society to support the improvements to the grounds for community use.
It's been moved and second, and Director Morrison has a question.
Yeah, thank you, and sorry I didn't get a chance to get to you beforehand to discuss this, but in review of the organization's letter, there appears to be an additional request for curbside bins and curbside collection service request from the regional district. I'm just in checking with staff, I'm not sure that's something that could be contemplated through a grant and aid, so I'm just wanting to confirm that's not a part of this
No,
request
not
that's
a
going
park.
forward
It's the
then.
park and the picnic tables, et cetera.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Moving now to information. Did I do the information? Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay Advisory Planning Commission, special meeting held January 22nd. And also Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay Advisory Planning Commission minutes for January 22nd. It's just for information. Moving on now to reports. I'd like to move on now to R1, which is the application for Laver Rock Road. And I'd like to welcome Mr. Munn.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members, public, and staff. I'll just advance, there we are. I'm here to present development permit DP 18B 17, 2957 Lavrock Road, a proposed subdivision of one lot. The property is located west of Shawnigan Lake, along the way to Kinsall Trestle. The 2.34 hectare parcel is largely wooded, as you can see. The R2 zone permits subdivision minimum of 1 hectare with a well and septic system. Currently, there is 1 single-family dwelling, 1 small suite, and 2 accessory buildings, 1 which will be removed if it's not already. And that's the secondary dwelling is on the right. The rest of the lot remains in a wooded state. The proposed subdivision is at the rear of the property in a panhandle form. It's, as you can see, that where you can see Lavrock Road cul-de-sac there, there's an access strip going to the rear. The plan meets the intent of the development permit guidelines. 47% of Lot 2 at the rear is proposed to be natural as retention, stormwater, and wooded. The wooded area functions for stormwater. There's also rain garden space proposed for stormwater management. Invasive species and replanting are noted. Invasive species removal and replanting are noted. And that's it.
Okay, looking for, is there any question, are there any questions for staff? Director Nicholson.
I have a question and a comment, maybe. So this subdivision is in the Cook Silo watershed. And I think it would be helpful in our reports that we added under the background a heading underlined that says watershed, so that people are aware of where these are as it relates to our water supply. So my question, I guess, is could we do that?
Mr. Munn.
Maybe this is a question for Mr. Blackwell.
Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you, through you to Director Nicholson. To the extent we have that information, and I think we largely do, if not entirely do, I think we absolutely can provide that information.
Director Nicholson.
So my follow-up is, I think this is an example of where we need to, when we do our OCP modernization, take a good hard look at the rules in the Cook Silo watershed. We've got significant water issues, and I don't believe we have anything here regarding requiring rainwater collection for the summertime or anything like that. And it's pretty clear that wells are pulling from the river because it's a groundwater-fed river. So I think we really need to take a good hard look at the lands in the whole Cook Silo watershed when we do our modernization.
Okay, are there any other questions for staff or the applicant? Seeing none, what's the committee's pleasure? Director Acton.
I would like to move the recommendation number 1 and 2. Should I read it out? Okay, Mr. Blackwell.
Mr. Blackwell, could you read 1 and 2, please? Oh, that helps, doesn't it? Is there a seconder for that? It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board. 1, that development permit application number DP 17, located at 2952 Laverock Road, be approved, and 2, that the general manager of land use services be authorized to permit minor revisions to the permit in accordance with the intent of DP guidelines of OCP bylaw number 3510.
So it's been moved and seconded. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'll call it. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. And this will go to the board meeting for Wednesday, February 27th. Thank you very much, Mr. Munn, and you're on for R2, application on Holland Avenue.
Good afternoon again. I'm here to present development permit DP 18C11, 3566 Holland Avenue in Cobble Hill, a proposed addition to the Cobblestone Inn pub. One note to start off with, there's the question raised earlier regarding the Advisory Planning Commission minutes attached to the report, and that they refer to the initial plans submitted, and this report refers to the resubmitted plans, so that they are different than that, the plans that were reviewed by the APC. So the property is located in the middle of Cobble Hill Village. On the north part of the half-hectare property, it's 0.5 plus hectares. It's in the C9 Village Neighborhood Pub Zone. It's a unique zone. The southern half of the lot is in the C5 commercial zone. The Holland Avenue frontage would remain. The addition would be at the rear of the building and part of the former septic area. The building on the right is a storage building. The gravel area at the rear of the pub was also used for a septic field and now is proposed for parking. The addition is shown here at the rear of the pub, and the additional parking, 3 spaces, is shown on the lower left. The addition does not propose an increase in the occupant load of the building, and the proposal meets the intent of the development permit guidelines. Those in general, the building design matches the existing building design and generally complies with the guidelines. The outdoor lighting has been added, and 3 parking spaces have been added to replace those that have been taken up with the addition. They provide permeable surfacing and wheel stops. And I'll entertain any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Munn? Mr. Wilson, Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not so much a question for Mr. Munn, but first of all, this was a fairly time-sensitive application because, as some will know, that the whole pub had to be refurbished and brought up to code because of a fire last year. There were time constraints as far as the insurance companies were concerned, and if the work hadn't been completed in time, that would have meant that the insurance would not have continued to pay the wages and salaries of those staff who had been displaced by the closure of the pub. In that respect, I'd like to thank the planning department for acting very quickly on bringing this to this board for consideration. I don't see a problem with it at all. I'd recommend that it be accepted.
So you're moving the recommendation?
Yes.
It's been moved and seconded. And Mr. Blackwell, could you read the recommendation? If there are any other questions or discussion on this, first of all, sorry. Seeing none, Mr. Blackwell.
The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board, 1, that development application number DP 18C11 located at 3566 Holland Avenue be approved as set out in the Development Services Division's staff report dated January 24th, 2019, and 2, that the General Manager of Land Use Services be authorized to permit minor revisions to the permit in accordance with the intent of DP guidelines of OCP bylaw number 3605.
Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. That will come to the board meeting Wednesday, February 27th. And welcome, Mr. Tippett, for R3, Allison Way.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello to the committee. I don't actually believe there's a presentation queued up. It's a fairly simple request. The report speaks to it. It's essentially a property in North Oyster on Allison Way, which is in the Shell Beach water utility area. Prior to about 2007, it was considered under the definitions in the zoning bylaw a community water service, and people within that subdivision were able to avail themselves of a 0.2 hectare minimum parcel size by virtue of that subdivision regulation. In 2007, the regulation was changed, requiring a minimum of 75 units to be connected to the system to be considered a community water system under the zoning for the purpose of subdivision. And furthermore, it also said that private utilities are basically excluded in the definition private utilities from qualifying as community water services. The subject property is, I think, the only, I could be wrong, but I think it might be the only parcel within the subdivision that isn't fully developed to the 0.2 hectare standard. And I'm not sure why it didn't get subdivided before, but nevertheless, it exists in a multiple of just over 3 times the minimum parcel size under the old rules where it was considered a community water service. So in this case, although it's a rather unusual application of development permit powers, the committee does have the ability to vary the definition of community water service with respect to this particular property, which would have the effect of allowing the pre-2007 definition to apply to this subdivision regulation, therefore a 0.2 hectare parcel size to apply, and 3 parcels potentially being creatable. What I wanted to also add, and this is an editorial, I guess, prediction of what might happen in the course of modernization, is I expect that we're going to be revising our definitions of community water and sewer service fairly soon, possibly in a fashion that would bring this system under the umbrella of what we continue to consider community water services, but that's speculation. We don't know until it happens, but there's been a trend to move away from having a minimum number of connections, and we also have at Shawnigan Lake a large private utility which qualifies as community water service there. So, being a variance, there were letters of notification that went out to people within 60 meters of the subject property. We got considerable interest in it, and those are attached generally as emails to the report. A lot of people were concerned about it, thinking that if this variance is granted, it's tantamount to approval of the subdivision, but it's not really. All it is it would lay the groundwork for the possibility of subdivision occurring if other requirements are met, in particular water provision requirements of the Shell Beach utility as a condition of subdivision. We also got correspondence from a representative of the management group that runs the utility, indicating that following discussion of this with me, that they no longer had concerns respecting it, acknowledging, I guess, that at the subdivision stage, the Ministry of Transportation will seek their approval. And so my recommendation is to support the proposal. Nevertheless, there was considerable confusion or opposition perhaps, so ultimately it's the committee's decision, but that's the lay of the land right now. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer, and perhaps, I'm not sure, the applicant might be here.
Okay, is there any questions? The applicant is here, and is there any questions for Mr. Tippett or the applicant? Director Nicholson.
So, does MOTI always follow the recommendations of the water utility or the water operator?
Madam Chair, through you, I can't actually speak to that authoritatively. They should, because when subdivision proposals are submitted to their office, they send them out to referral agencies, including the regional district, fire departments, local utilities, if there are any. And their decision to approve or not approve the subdivision is usually dependent upon the feedback they receive. So in this case, one would expect that would occur, and if the water utility, for whatever reason, said that their water supply is insufficient, or the arrangements that the proponent of the subdivision has for providing new water service are not adequate, they would tell the Ministry of Transportation Approving Authority that, and they wouldn't approve the subdivision. So I guess that's how it's supposed to work, and as far as I know, it works like that. There might be the odd one where it hasn't, but I'm not aware of any myself, but that doesn't mean it's never happened.
So it's not that we've applied for subdivision approving officer status, that this isn't one of the reasons because they don't listen to what they hear?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a bunch of other reasons that are, I don't remember that being one of the reasons for seeking that authority from the province, but you know, I suppose if we were to do research in our files, we might find the odd one which slipped through the cracks somehow, although it would be pretty serious, especially when it comes to water supply and additional development being approved, and there already being shortages. You know, you would think that they'd be very cautious about going there.
Follow up?
So I know up in Area H there are water issues, quite a few water issues. So do we have special requirements up there on rainwater catchment, for example? It's my
Madam
thing
Chair,
today.
at this time, we don't have special measures regarding that. However, we do have very strict protective measures for the aquifers because they are vulnerable to surface contamination based on activities on the ground. Through modernization, I guess we'll be exploring what you just said, Director Nicholson.
Seeing no other questions, the committee's pleasure. Are you moving it?
Yes, I am.
Director Marcotte moves the recommendation. Is there a seconder? It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Blackwell.
Recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that application number DVP 18H02 regarding a property legally described as PID 017-536-499 by B&W Kaurenberg be approved and the definition of community water system be varied to include Shell Beach Water Utility Association for the subject property alone.
Question, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. That will go to Wednesday, February 27th, and we move now to R4, which you do have two add-on pieces of information to this R4. Do you need a minute, or can we move on? Okay, we're moving on. Mr. Tippett.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Once again, I don't have a presentation to give because my main presentation to the committee on this matter came before you last year. Can't remember the month exactly, but I believe we had a public meeting on the last day of November last year concerning the 3755 Rosedale Road proposal to create a new probably A2A zone or A2C zone that would permit the growing and processing of cannabis products on that site. A number of you were at the public meeting that was held at the Hub in Cowichan Station. There were lots of, there was a lively discussion, lots of opinions shared, and you heard some of those at the beginning of this meeting as well. So following the public meeting, what we did is we compiled all those comments. They were written down and are attached to the agenda as minutes or a record of what transpired at the meeting. Additionally, we've received other correspondence and some emails even from today that I think were given to you as late items in relation to this. And so there appears to be a fair bit of concern about the potential impact of this operation on the site. Now, having said that, there were some measures or are some measures that are possibly going to be proposed by the proponents in respect of those concerns. And I know they're here and they'd like an opportunity to present those to the committee. We don't normally have the practice of revising a staff recommendation following a public meeting. We just present the proceedings of the public meeting input to the committee for decision, but if there are any questions that staff can answer, we'd be happy to try and answer them. And meanwhile, I think the proponent has to, or wishes to show some additional information that they've prepared following the meeting.
Okay, what's the committee's pleasure? I'd like the, Director Wilson, do you have a question for staff? Oh.
Again, Madam Chair, thank you. Not so much of a question, but I'm just wondering, see, I have no objection in principle. I attended that meeting, and there were a lot of lively discussions going on. And from what I've seen from the building plans and the construction plans, it seems to have been fairly well thought out. Some of the things that I do have some concerns about, though, which came up at that meeting, was the number of attendees who were there who were not really, and this has been brought up earlier, who were not from the immediate area. It seemed to have been packed with a lot of people who were there to support that, and that's fine. That's okay as well. But the letters, one of the other things that concerns me, that there was a very large file, which I had there. One of the sections were letters and emails of support for the facility. And again, that's fine. But what concerned me most of all was that most of those letters and emails of support were from people which really weren't in that area at all. There were letters and emails from Saanich, from Port Alberni, from Up Island, which is a little bit worrying, to say the least. And the third point which comes up is a lack of consultation with the immediate neighbors, which doesn't seem to, it did take place, but outside of a certain area, whereas those who lived closely, the most closely to it, didn't seem to know anything about this planning application at all. But again, that's not questions, just observations that I got from that meeting and from what the other things that I've read. Thank you.
We'll have questions now, and then if it's moved and seconded, we'll go into comments. Are there any other questions for staff? Ian, Director Morrison.
Yeah, thank you. And further to Mr. Tippett's comments, yes, there was a public meeting held. The community came out. A number of directors were in attendance. And though it may not be specific practice for for staff to be modifying reports and the likes and recommendations, I think this is exactly why we recommend that public meetings be held, so that there's an opportunity to get the information and the application before the community, and also give the applicant an opportunity to respond to issues that have been raised as far as concerns in the community. So I think that it'd be more than appropriate, and would turn to the chair and ask if the applicant perhaps come forward and present some of the information that they've come to as far as a result of the meeting that was held, and some of the changes that they'd like to make to their application. So I thought
Absolutely,
I
I'll
would put
wait.
that forward.
Sure, thank you. I will do that, but I have Director Acton first. Would you wait for the applicant? If the applicant would like to come forward and present, please. Welcome.
Yeah, it's just right there. Yep, yep, it's already loaded. Good afternoon, everybody, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Jared Steingart. I'm from Westbrook Consulting, and I've been with this process for about a year now, and I'm working with the applicant today. So just, we've had a lot of background on this presented in previous meetings. I'm not going to rehash the old information. Rather, I'd like to kind of build off of, where we've been, what data has been collected through engagement with the neighbors, and I'd like to kind of share the new information or updated information, if you will. So there's an air photo of the site. The property is right in the middle of the screen there. This gives everybody a bit of context. We've got sort of the yellow box there, and sort of slightly to the right of the middle of the screen is the subject property. You can see sort of Duncan to the north and Cobble Hill to the east. It's a very rural area. It's a little bit closer shot there. Very much kind of the outlying area for when considering populated centers. In Mr. Tippett's report, there's a number of photos that show how densely vegetated the area is. That's looking from the road. You can barely see in. I'd like to contrast that with the photo from recently. So, it's winter time, the leaves are down. You really can't see into the property. There's a lot of evergreen trees. And that's sort of the only photo. You can just barely make out the roof line of one of the houses. So even in the wintertime, it is fairly screened from the road. Side by side of one of Mr. Tippett's photos, winter versus summer. Again, very hard to see in there. Lots of landscape screening. So the objective, like Mr. Tippett said, is to create a zone that would permit cannabis growing and production within the secondary agricultural. A2 is the secondary agricultural. It is not residential, although residential is permitted use on that agricultural land. Cannabis has been grown there for excessive 10 years and under different government approvals. Everything's changing within the country now with licensing and that type of thing. So this would be a purpose-built facility, and Health Canada would be the regulatory body overseeing everything. There are many legal non-conforming operations out there. I can't tell you where they all are because of privacy issues, but they are fairly common within these rural communities. Just a quick overview of the timeline. We've started nearly a year ago. We had an APC meeting back in the summer. followed by an open house that the applicants had at their property. They've tried to engage with neighbors sort of on an ongoing basis. We were here in August at this committee, and following the recommendations of the APC, having the neighborhood public meeting, we had the election in there, so that's why there's a bit of a time gap between the August 1st and November 29th meetings. So the big concerns which have come up today as well, traffic, visibility, noise, odor, water use. These are pretty standard, for any development application, these are the standard concerns that we quite often hear. From what I've seen is that these are all solvable problems, and these are issues which we can work hard with staff to mitigate against. What we haven't been hearing is an opposition to cannabis itself is just, what will the operation look like? So for the neighborhood, again, I'm a very visual person, so the yellow box is the property. These are neighbors who've been concerned and raised issues. The green there are the neighbors who have reached out and said, hey, we like what you're doing, we're very supportive. We've got an updated information pack of support, which we'll just pass out quickly here. So in a community like this, a lot of the question is, what does it look like? And these are photos taken from a LP facility in the Lower Mainland, and you can kind of see just over that hedge line, you've got a structure there, which is actually an LP facility, and it's been done in a form and a character that sort of mirrors the rural setting. And, a person wouldn't know if there's horses in there or tractors or any other kind of agricultural use. This one's sort of hard to see, but it's another angle of the same building, and the door actually have sort of those, sort of cross bracing to look like a barn. So, they've had some attention to detail there to make this, an aesthetically pleasing type of building. So, back to these concerns. At the meeting at the hub, what was discussed for traffic mitigation is having a shuttle service, similar to a park and ride. We'd establish an off-site parking area and then bring employees in and then take them back to their cars at the end of the day. Visibility, trying to have the building placed far from the road. I'll come back to that sort of in a minute here. Retaining all the vegetation, as well as creating a building that's in keeping with the farm use. No concrete structure. It'd be something that'd be very aesthetically pleasing. Something like a barn or a rural type of building. It would be a fully enclosed building and insulated. So any activity that's happening would be, the noise would be mitigated through just being the very nature of being inside. Odor is another concern that's brought up. It's proposed to use negative air pressure, so basically air can't escape, and air would actually be wanting to get in because it's in a negative pressure to the outside atmosphere. Any makeup air would be exchanged through filtration and trying to really minimize any odor impact. Water use, we've explored rainwater harvesting, capturing rainwater, recycling water, on-site filtration, purification. We could get pretty close to a closed loop on this site and have minimal impact on the aquifers. So back to the building location. That red ellipse there is where we've been looking at building siting. After the meeting at the hub, we talked with the consultant and said, what size do we need? Because that was a big question, how much square footage, that type of thing. We've gone to a smaller footprint, and we've looked at 3 possible areas. The area highlighted in the green box is a preferred location because that's the furthest from Rosedale Road. We'd be looking at a 15-meter setback, and that would also allow preservation of the structures that are there. So in consultation with one of the neighbors behind, and this letter's in the packet on the left-hand side, 2303 Colvin Road, the Malones, they have consented to the 15-meter setback, and they are very supportive of this. And again, you can see that they're one of the green properties there. So I believe the siting is a big part of this equation, where if we can draw the building to the back of the property, make it as discreet as possible, that'll have the most buffer from those other concerned residents. So again, this is a similar photo, or same photo I showed earlier. If we had a new purpose-built structure behind that house, it'd be very hard to see it from the roadway. And I think this photo really illustrates that point very well. In discussion with Mr. Tippett, we've been talking about a site-specific zone. This is nothing that's going to be changing or affecting the CVRD as a whole. We're happy to work with staff to create a mutually agreeable zone that mitigates some of these issues. Where the zone cannot address the issues that have come up, we're happy to create covenants that would be secured through the zoning process for things like the employee shuttle, the building form and character, landscape screening, or any other concerns that would come up. You know, we feel this is a really solid application, and I think there's a lot of support out there, and I believe the next step is to bring this to a public hearing. So just, if I may, through the chair, just curious who the local residents are, maybe by show of hands, if people are local residents who are here to hear what's going on.
It's not necessary.
Not
It's
necessary?
Not necessary,
Okay.
no.
Okay. Be happy to answer any questions if you've got them.
Yep.
Thank
Is
you very
there
much.
any questions for the applicant's consultant? Oh, no, questions from the board, sorry. The opportunity will be, well, you'll have at the end of the meeting, but right now it's for the Electoral Area Services Committee and Director Nicholson.
I have a question for staff. I noticed in one of the pieces of correspondence that a neighbor does daycare, and that, which I believe is a permitted use. And so I'm wondering if we have provisions, do we not, about the closeness of, is this going to hamper someone else's use of their property?
Mr. Tippett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, we don't have a setback requirement where, I'd say, a rural residential or a secondary agricultural property permits daycare use between that and cannabis production facilities. What we do is we have a setback in the general regulations of 300 meters from certain zone categories, which include residential, comprehensive zones, and parks and institutional zones, which include schools. So it wouldn't, in a legal sense, be a problem for that neighbor operating the daycare if this were built. It would not put them in contravention of any kind of setback.
Okay, looking to Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to say that I was at that meeting, and it was somewhat skewed by the attendance. There was a lot of local people who came out, who lived in the area, who were concerned about it. One man spoke about it. I think he was the last person to speak from the public, and I agree with him on the flavor of the community. And this is not a question of, is this a good business idea? It's a great business idea. And it is a permitted use. It's totally legal, so it's not about cannabis. It got skewed at the meeting what this was actually about, this community engagement was about. A lot of people who were for it were not local people from the area. These are hobby farms, it's rural. I think a facility like this belongs in a light industrial area, just like Arc Road was just recently approved for the same kind of production. So it's not a matter of whether it's a proper use. It's not a moral issue here. And this property is not zoned accordingly. I would like to move that number 4, the application number RZ18B01 be denied, if I have a seconder.
It's been moved and seconded. Any more
I'll speak to that too some more, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I can see where this is going, and it's gonna continue to get we've asked the community what they think, so I think we should listen. They've come out right away from the beginning, the local people, and said they don't want to turn their area into a light industrial area. Fair enough. And I think we need to think about how, moving forward, what we're gonna do when somebody, just because they own a piece of property, they wanna rezone it for, to change the zoning for use. And to me, it just makes a lot more sense to be on the highway, to be with transit, and to keep this rural feel to communities like Area E or Cowichan Station. Is a beautiful place, and I don't think just because someone owns a piece of property, they have a right to push something on the community that the locals do not want. So, thank you.
So it's been moved and seconded for denial, and I have Director Morrison next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't be supporting the recommendation and for a number of reasons. And partially because I've been here long enough to see that we've had, you know, all of the areas in the regional district have gone through difficult times from '08 onward with challenges with people finding work and there being not a lot of opportunities in our communities, and where they've been forced to go to the centers and to Nanaimo and to Victoria to find work. And one of the things that I've seen personally in my area is that people view it to be the place where you just go to recreate. So we have homes that are empty 10 months of the year, and people don't want a lot of services. And I look at the planning principles that we learn about, where they talk about diversity of opportunities, of diversity of types of activities that make complete communities. And we talk about agriculture, and we saw a slide this morning of an idyllic property that is, you know, perhaps one of those hobby farms, and they're being very idyllic, but they're industrial farming activities. And just from a placemaking perspective, I can't support when we look at a community and say that there shall only be one type of activity going on in there, and that'll be residential. Or we won't even contemplate another type of activity which is different. Because in the past, a complete community had a sawmill and had a corner store and had blacksmiths and had a lot of these varied activities that have all left our rural communities. And you have to leave your communities to get any of these services. So I don't tend to agree with the notion that any sort of service is going to go along the highway or going to have to go in the core. I think that there's opportunities for us to help grow complete communities where people can walk to their jobs, where they can recreate in their communities, and that there be a lot of opportunities. I think that it's very premature based on a public meeting to say that it's time to deny this. I think that there's been a movement by the applicants to address some of the concerns that were raised at the public meeting, which was exactly why the public meeting was held. And I think there's merit in this moving forward to go to a public hearing. So I won't be supporting the recommendation on the floor. Thank you.
Director Smith.
Through the chair, I apologize. I do have an unfortunate throat issue today. I support Director Acton's motion. I think that an OCP is put together by the community for the community, and the community spoke when they put together the OCP. Having others coming from other areas to speak dilutes the voice of the local community that has put together the OCP. So I support Director Acton.
Thank you. Director Kuhn.
Yes, I concur with Director Morrison fully.
Thank you. Director Marcotte.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur with Mr. Morrison, the same as the others.
Okay. Director Acton and then Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Time and resources is an issue here. We can see where this is heading. The people who live in the area are here today. We asked them for their opinion, and now we're not going to listen to them. It's not suitable for their area. Then we're going to have a public hearing, and they're going to come again. This is it. We can see where it's going. The local community should have a voice, and they're here, and it would be nice if they were heard. It's not a proper use for their community, and that's why we have zoning. And right now, there's an idea of changing the zoning, and the community has identified that it's not in the flavor of their area.
Mr. Blackwell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for context, I just should bring to your attention that the OCP designates this for agricultural use and the zoning permits agriculture. And I would caution the board or suggest that the board reflect on all of the range of agricultural options that are available in the marketplace and the complexities of determining which form of agriculture should be permitted on a piece of land and which form of agriculture is not permitted. It can create unanticipated consequences to start differentiating between different iterations of, for instance, horticulture. So you don't get backed into a corner should somebody want to start a greenhouse operation or any other type of non-soil bound form of agriculture. So I just offer that for context because the issue of agriculture is much bigger than one type of horticultural product versus another kind of horticultural product.
Director Nicholson?
Thank you. I support Director Acton's motion. I actually live in this neighborhood, and I know it really well. And I actually am very confident that the majority of neighbors do not appreciate this, would not appreciate this going forward. And I personally don't see any benefits to the neighbors. I don't see that a large-scale cannabis commercial grow-up facility would make a complete community in this particular area. And I think that they're being asked to take on some risks. And they've got concerns ranging from the water, which we've talked about, potential for groundwater depletion and pollution, wastewater and septic issues, odor, noise, traffic, fire hazard, security, property values, and basically generally insufficient information about what this whole thing's going to look like. And I'm not convinced that we have the ability to enforce mitigative measures adequately. And on top of that, in the spirit of greenhouse gas reductions, it seems ludicrous to me to put a large commercial operation out in the boonies when it would be better serviced closer to services and major roads. And on this question of agriculture, honestly, if you were to look at this area, you wouldn't zone this as A2. It's really rural residential, and that's the way it's being used. And even so, as a A2 zone, agriculture is, the lot size, we're talking small-scale agriculture. These types of industrialized agriculture ought to be on ALR land or on industrial land, which is what our bylaw currently says. It doesn't say we should take large-scale industrial agriculture and plop it in the middle of a little rural residential neighborhood. So I really feel very strongly that we need to deny this and not waste, as Director Acton mentioned, more resources and continue to raise the expectations of the applicants that this is a good location for their idea.
Okay. Mr. Blackwell, could you read the recommendation, please?
The recommendation before you is that it be recommended that application number RZ18B01 at the property located at 3737 and 3755 Rosedale Road be denied.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of denial? Opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now. Oh, that'll be at the next board meeting, Wednesday, February 27th. Moving on now to R5. It is CR2 zoning in Cowichan Bay, and it's Mr. Tippett again.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We'll just wait till the gallery clears.
Okay.
Just a sec. Thank you, Mr. Tippett. Does anybody need a break, or are we okay? Okay, we'll break for 5.
Or 10.
Okay, we'll begin back to the meeting, and we're going on to R5, which is Mr. Tippett again, and it's CR2 zoning in Cowichan Bay.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Once again, I am depriving you of the benefit of a PowerPoint slide here, but it's something that doesn't really lend itself too much to a PowerPoint presentation in any case. And this is just a question, it's not an application. There are 4 parcels in Cowichan Bay Village, which have the CR2 zone, which is a cluster residential zone. This zone was applied to these vacant parcels during the implementation of this Cowichan Bay OCP at the time the zoning was written, in anticipation that there would be the possibility of an innovative type of cluster development occurring on these sites. And one of the owners of one of these 4 parcels approached staff and the director late last year, I believe it was, asking whether it was conceivable that R3 zoning could be reapplied to their site. And the answer was technically yes, because the official community plan designates the entire village residential area the same way and provides flexibility within that designation to either have them in the village residential R3 zone or the CR2 cluster residential 2 zone. But it led to a larger question because there were 3 other owners of similar CR2 zone property in the area. It raised the question as to whether we should maybe systematically approach the owners of all 4 of those parcels that are zoned CR2 and ask them whether they prefer the CR2 zone or the R3 zone, get the results back of this little mini poll of these 4 owners, present it to committee, and then the committee can decide whether we would require these individuals to apply individually for rezoning if that's their preference, or let's say if all of them would prefer to have R3 zoning, would the CVRD possibly initiate such an amendment of its own volition? So all I'm asking the committee to endorse today is the idea of the first step of that, contacting the owners in writing to see what their preference is vis-a-vis zoning, and report the results of that communication back to committee when I get it.
questions for staff? Director Smith.
Through the chair to staff, do you have time with all the other applications that are on the planning department to be looking at this right now?
Madam Chair, that is a very important question, and it's a good question. Do we have time? Well, this is one of the considerations we'd have to bring back to committee when we get the results of this. You know, there's one possibility is, let's say 2 of the 4 owners get back and say we'd rather have R3 zoning, which means that we could either tell them they have to both as individuals apply for R3 zoning, then we'd have 2 applications to deal with, or conversely, we could initiate it and do 2 for 1, like at the same time. Or if all 4 get back and say they'd prefer to have R3 zoning, we could either tell all 4 you have to apply as individuals and process 4 rezoning applications, or do 1 as an initiative. So assuming that they actually do want to change the zoning and would go follow through with a rezoning proposal, and you know, I think this one owner who initiated this discussion was willing to go there. I don't know that there's any difference in the amount of time it would take, but I think on the face of it, yeah, it looks weird to suggest that we would just propose a new make work project for the department because we are so busy. But I think given the alternative, it might actually be more efficient, but we'll have to get the results first. Maybe none of them want it to change other than that one, in which case 1 application, it's the same amount of work either way. So to be continued, but very good question.
Thank you. It's just something in Area D that needs to be looked at with the cluster residential zoning that's been lingering. Okay, looking for the staff investigate the rezoning of CR2. Been moved. Second. Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now to R6, Enrico Winery. Mr. Morano, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have before the committee here an application, a liquor license application for a structural change at Enrico Winery located at 3280 Telegraph Road in Area A. Essentially, the tasting room and wine lounge area was increased with permit to increase the occupant load from 75 to 100 patrons. And in order to satisfy the license, this application needs to be referred to local government, CVRD, for whether or not we want to opt in this process or opt out. Opting in would require staff to organize public input, and opting out would just leave it in the reliance of the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. I think that's what they're called now. Madam Chair.
Thank you. There's a recommendation here. It's been moved by Director Morrison. It's been seconded by Director Smith. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, sorry, haven't read it out.
So the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that the CVRD opt out of providing comment and leave complete reliance on the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch to manage and take full responsibility of this license for Enrico Winery, located at 3280 Telegraph Road, and that is regarding license number 303664.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on now to R7, Mr. McDonald, the 2018 year-end building report. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do have a PowerPoint. Let's see if we can find it, though. Where are we here? Thanks, Kelly. Thanks again, Madam Chair. 2018 was a very busy year for building. I've put together a stat sheet here just to show some of the new members as well of the committee how things have changed over the last 6 years. You can see here that Area B has seen a significant increase of basically doubling, as well as areas G, H, and I. And Even Area Ethian has had a significant increase. He's always bothering me. You can see that between 2017 and 2008 were two of our best years, obviously, in that time period as well. So basically, we've seen since 2013, this is a 46% increase in the number of permits that have been issued. Going forward here, this is the electoral arrows broken down over last year. So you can see the number of permits as well as the values for those. And there's a chart that also shows for the permits. Area B is the leader there with 31%. In these, some of the values are high due to things like BC Transit in Area E. There was a fire hall in Area H. The boys' school in Area B had 3 large permits, and Area D had a chicken plant that went in. As well as a lot of building permits being issued, we've also run into a large increase in number of stop work orders. This is something taking up a lot of valuable resource time. Last year, we had approximately 28 of them, 13 alone in Area B. The other thing that happened at the end of 2018 was we also adopted there was a new building code, had approximately 600 technical changes in it, and that came into effect on December 18th. I put together a quick summary for January as well for you. We had 20 permits issued, and I've added some new stats here just for you can understand what the building department goes through. So we also in that time period did 179 inspections, logged 4,336 kilometers, 5 more stop work orders, and the total value was $2,632,060. The 20 permits broke down as 6 single-family dwellings, 6 renos in single-family dwelling. We had 3 garages, 2 commercial renos, an industrial reno, a siting permit, and a plumbing permit. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. McDonald? Oh, yes, Director Wilson.
Again, it's not a question, it's an observation, but first of all, the people I've talked to in the construction industry so far have been very, very satisfied with the way the inspections have been carried out, and I'd like to just thank your staff for doing everything they have done so far on top of that.
Thank you so much. This was for information. We'll move on to R8. Mr. Morano.
End of slideshow. Thought I had some slides. I guess not. No? I guess not. Madam Chair, this report is 2018 year-end bylaw enforcement report. In 2018, bylaw enforcement fielded 249 registered complaints, 29 of which continue to be under investigation. Bylaw enforcement staff continue to utilize the ticket information bylaw with regard to municipal tickets. Tickets were issued for issues such as dog-related issues, building, parks, smoke nuisance, or backyard burning, fireworks, zoning, and noise-related issues. Enforcement staff has fostered relationship with other enforcement staff in the Cowichan Valley Regional District, which includes the municipalities such as North Cowichan, the City of Duncan, Cowichan Tribes, Ladysmith, and the Town of Lake Cowichan. The main objective for enforcement staff is to gain voluntary compliance. When this is not possible, a more formal approach is necessary, which comes in the form of formal notification, ticket, or legal action. Legal action in one matter resulted in a court order in 2018 effectively ceasing the commercial use of a sawmill operation on residentially zoned property, a parcel in Shawnigan Lake. The dog control contract was awarded to Coastal Animal Services in 2018, who handle the first contact for any dog-related issues. If dog-related issues are irresolvable, they default to the bylaw enforcement officer and subsequently to our solicitor, if need be. The sale of dog licenses totaled 2,470 in 2018, which is fairly standard. Our fees have remained consistent for several years now, for a full rate of $35 with a discount of $10 in the month of January. Enforcement continues to, bylaw enforcement continues to utilize advertising, website, social media, and many other, and telephone queries on a daily basis to prevent, as a preventative measure, and to inform the public of this, bylaws that we enforce. In summary, zoning and waste management related issues continue to account for the majority of the file load. Zoning offenses increased notably in areas such as illegal suites, residential use of recreational vehicles, and/or tiny homes. Waste management offenses continue in areas such as smoke nuisance, or i.e. backyard burning, dumping, land clearing, debris burns, fireworks related issues as well. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Morano? Director Smith.
Through the chair, are any of the waste management, are any of that involving our garbage at all, in that people are dumping garbage and that type of thing? Because I noticed on our map, it indicated a specific area. So what is going in, for example, area G on the map, it indicates a specific area. So what would those be, the smoke, and would that be dumping or land clearing debris? Like what?
Madam Chair,
Can I just ask?
through the Madam Chair, correct. Any waste management issue is going to encompass anything that deals with waste. That's a category, and we do have subcategories after that. For waste management, it would include smoke nuisance bylaw, land clearing, debris burn, dumping, and facility licensing.
Director Marcotte, is there a follow-up, Director Smith? Okay. Director Marcotte, and then Director Nicholson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to our bylaw officer there. In my area, we had a lot of downed trees, a lot of when that big storm came up, and we still to this day have a lot of on the roads and on private properties, a lot of the trees and the limbs that are still there, and everyone is still burning on that. A lot of people are, as well as the people from the province that have been sent out to get the roads back to normal. So would that be an offense if you're clearing the debris from the roads and burning them because you have no other choice?
Madam Chair, correct. There are no special allowances for the storm that we had. I believe our engineering department offered an extension of services that I don't know off the top of my head right now in order to deal with that. And but unfortunately, there was no special permission or allowance for anyone because of that storm to burn any material.
And at the same time, the air quality was really severe as well, and so the green burning added to it. Director Nicholson.
I'm curious about the disproportionate number of infractions in Area I relative to the population. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm surprised about that too, especially the zoning inquiries. What are?
Madam Chair, I can't really get into each individual issue, but it's more of an ebbs and flows, and you might find in another year Area I will be fairly low comparatively. So I can't explain why. Maybe it comes down to reporting, and it seems like, I guess this past year, the people of Yubo and Mead Creek decided to be more diligent in their reporting, which we totally appreciate.
Okay, Director Morrison, did you want to speak? Were you on the list? No? Okay. Oh, Director Salmon.
Thank you. Yeah, not a question directly, but just it was nice to meet the soil bylaw officer briefly earlier. Maybe just say a couple words? What will he be doing since we don't yet have the bylaw? Not for you,
Mr. Blackwell?
Thank you, through you, to Director Salmon. Basically nothing, sitting there and kind of, I'm just kidding. There's a lot of work to be done in preparation for being able to administer that bylaw. Some of that, of course, is becoming familiar with our regulatory system that we have here. We have a bit more work to do with regard to advancing the programs, in terms of developing the application forms, et cetera, et cetera. We also need to develop an outreach process so that when it goes live, our first efforts will be with regard to education. And we will kind of move into other than perhaps for the most egregious scenarios, but the primary focus will be easing the community into this new regime to a great extent, with the exception that there will be immediate action on things that are deemed to be a serious problem. And if there are any gaps in terms of time, availability, of course, that bylaw officer will be supporting the existing bylaw officer team. Believe it or not, there's more work than we can actually respond to.
Director Smith?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about the park ranger bylaw officer that will be coming on. How will this change in what you're doing and the reports?
That's for Mr. Farquhar.
Oh, pardon me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, certainly, first and foremost, will be dependent upon the decision of the board in respect to the 2019 budget being approved. With that approval, it would move resources to create a full-time park ranger position that would be involved in all the electoral areas and regional parks in terms of enforcing the parks bylaw and doing compliance, as well as looking at the ongoing maintenance of our parks in terms of the services delivered by our contractor. But it'll be a full-time position focused strictly on parks and trails across the region. And that'll be separate from the current bylaw staff person that deals with parks-related matters.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Morano? Seeing none, thank you very much. Moving on now to R9, which happens to be, I've got myself on the list here with a verbal report that I think many of you will be very familiar with. This is establishing a license of occupation on Cowichan Bay Road within the village of Cowichan Bay. The issue is parking. And working with the Ministry of Transportation, who of course we all know owns most of the area in Cowichan Bay. So we need to investigate a license of occupation on Cowichan Bay Road within the village so we can move that ahead and see what can be established. It's critical.
So moved.
Is there a seconder? It's been moved and seconded. Any questions? Director Nicholson.
What isn't a license of occupation?
License of occupation is to take from ministry like a permit to construct when we do trails with parks. It's taking over from Ministry of Transportation a piece of property of theirs, and we have a license to occupy it, which means we have responsibility to look after it, maintain it, and et cetera, et cetera.
So this report will include
this, it would include how we would be able to go about it,
resources required, staff time, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. Currently, there's 2 giant buses that have been there for a week. They got some VIP spots. Okay, I'm gonna call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now to R10. AVIC resolution report, Mr. Blackwell? Is it?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Brian Crothers here, so.
No, this is before you for your consideration.
So I will turn to Director Morrison. My apologies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the direction of either the committee or the board, it was tasked of Mr. Carruthers and I to investigate the crafting of what we hope will be gold star resolutions to put before AVICC for the convention this year. The information is contained in the report. There are two. There is the one in regards to the strong fiscal futures document that was produced 4 years ago, I believe, which I have a copy in the chair's office if anyone would like to see it. And there's a resolution there, and also a resolution in regards to regulation of private managed forest lands, which is sort of coming at it from a bit of a different perspective in the hopes that it will make it into the book for individual debate. I put those before you and would move that the recommended resolution be endorsed.
It's been moved and second. Do you want to read the resolution recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation is as follows, that it be recommended to the board that a strong fiscal futures and regulation of privately managed forest land resolutions as defined in the February 6, 2019 CAO staff report be forwarded to the AVICC for consideration at the 2019 convention.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now to, sorry, unfinished business. Yes.
There's no unfinished business.
I was just going straight into new business. New business 1, which is a news release, and Director Morrison will speak to that.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to note that the regional district has been successful with a number of other governments in accessing up to $400,000 in funding for reaching or reducing carbon emissions in rural areas. Everybody should have received a copy of the press release, and look forward to working with staff to get some of the initiatives that will help to reduce carbon emissions in rural areas included into our OCPs and zoning bylaws.
Thank you. Any questions? Director Nicholson.
Yeah, I think this is great, and I think it speaks to whether we could use some of this funding to inform our modernization part of the OCP, because I think that's going to be a lot about climate change. So is there
Mr. Blackwell?
how is that going to work within this organization? Because I noticed that was in environmental services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Director Nicholson. I can't speak to it. I'm not familiar with the details of it, but certainly I think, as you point out, there's a significant need for that emphasis. And as we move forward to the modernization process, these are the kinds of things we have to factor in, i.e. silos, taking advantage of funding to do a deeper dive into areas that need some detailed research or analysis, policy analysis, so that we are prepared to meet some of these challenges around climate change, as well as policies that are directed toward reducing our ecological footprint in the region.
Director Nicholson, follow-up?
Yeah, so I don't want $400,000 study to disappear, $400,000 for work to be done to disappear without us having a further conversation about how that's going to work, because I think it's really important that we start to deal with the issues that we talked about this morning relating to OCP stuff. So can I make a motion that staff come back with some further information on how this will be used in relation to the rural OCP modernization process?
Okay. So you're making, that is your motion? Did we get that motion, or would you like it written out? Got it? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions to the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, we move on now to Parks Commission and Mr. Farquhar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to give the committee an update on where things are at with the expression of interest invitation to members in your communities to put forward their interest to join one of the advisory park commissions since mid-January. We've had ads out. We've had out on Facebook, CVR's website. The closing date for receiving applications is this Friday, February the 8th. However, you may want to give consideration to a further extension given the somewhat limited number of expression of interest applications have been received thus far. For your consideration, we could extend it to February 20th, Wednesday, February 20th. That's 2 weeks today. And it would still provide time for any interested parties coming forward that you have an interest to move on to a commission to bring that forward to the board on the 27th of February. So at your pleasure, if there's a desire, just direction to staff to extend this to February 20th. I leave it with the committee to consider any questions you might have at this time.
Thank you. It's been moved. Second. And are there any questions for Mr. Farquhar? Director Acton and Director Salmon.
Well, people were lined up to join the APC. How come they're not lining up to join the Parks Commission?
Madam Chair, I would defer to the area directors in terms of the interest in their community. We're doing everything we can in terms of making it aware, but please do spread the word around that the application is available and it's simple to fill out on the CVRD website. And we welcome people, if listening at home, to go there now and fill the form out.
Okay, I'll be serious on this one. That said, I'm going to go ahead and appoint people who have identified that they want to be on our Area B Parks Commission, but there is still room. So if somebody out there listening is hesitant, you can still get it in.
Right, I had a little whisper in my ear that planning is cool. That's what it is. More for the APC. Director Salmon.
Yeah, I support extending. I'm just curious, though, how many responses have you had?
Not that many, to be quite honest. And I am aware that through individual directors, there has been direct contact with some of you around the table already. So this is really an opportunity for those that you might not be aware in your community have an interest to put themselves forward for your consideration. So we had hope to have a few more by now.
Director Nicholson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't see a problem with APC. I've got people lining up. I've got to turn them away. So I don't know quite what's going on in your other areas there. But, we've got, well, you know what Cobble Hill's like.
Director Acton.
So sorry to keep dwelling on this, but, well, I think it goes to show you that people really don't look at the citizen much. People are online, really. So we should be boosting this on Facebook. We should have Instagram. That's where people are. So anyway, just a comment.
Slacker. That's another one. So seeing, going to call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Director Acton, it's budget 531, I believe.
Yes.
That you would like to speak to.
So that's the South Cowichan watershed function. And those who pay into it, area A, B, C, and D, we received an email a day before the board meeting, but some of the information I didn't consider because I hadn't checked all my email yet. So I'd like to discuss again, looking back on the recommendations from that. Ms. Miller recommended that we keep, there's $25,000 coming forward from reserve, it's either reserve, I think it's surplus funds. And that would cover any of the staff time involved to cover what has been started. So looking at what was proposed in this function, not a lot of it is mandatory or time sensitive. And I went back and looked from last year, and in fact, we did tell the public that this was a one-time thing and that on the horizon was a possible watershed function. So I really believe that the South should not be penalized and charge twice for a watershed function that is meant to cover the jobs listed in it, or functions, sorry. So I have a recommendation that we bring the $25,000 surplus funds forward for any staff time that would result from closing up the loop of some of the work that has been done, and that we put the requisition at 0 for 531.
Director Acton, Mr. Blackwell has a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just something for your consideration. Perhaps this should be moved to the February 27th board meeting when the budget's actually being considered, and then this can be introduced into that discussion, and then those amendments can be considered in that context.
So would you?
We can refer this to the 27th.
Okay, so we could refer it to the 27th and also include all of the documentation to date then, because what's been happening is we don't have all the staff reports attached with it, so just all relevant information included as well, instead of just the financials.
Okay, so a referral for this budget matter to go to the 27th. It's been moved. Seconder? It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the referral? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, where does that leave us now? Question period. So, is there anybody that wishes to address the chair? It must be truly a question and not statements of opinions. Questioners are not permitted to make a speech. Hello, Cliff.
Hi, I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Madam Chair, on the stop work orders for Area B, could we have that expanded and let us know why we're getting these stop orders roughly, and if there's anything the public can do to prevent them?
I'm not sure. I'd have to get back to you on that, because it's yeah, it's confidential and extra work.
Amazing. It would seem that there should be an opportunity for the public to learn. Madam Chair, on forestry was brought up, and I was looking at some of our CBRD forest, and they're coming along pretty nice. They were planted, but it certainly looks like they could be spaced or limbed to make them a better tree in the long run. And I just wonder if Parks has something like this in mind to look after our forests that we now have planted.
So are you talking about forest land? Are you talking about trees that are inside our parks? Because we don't, it's forestry land, we don't own any. I mean, CBRD doesn't have any forestry land. That would be private.
What is behind SIA then? I think we have 200 and some odd acres in there.
Okay, that's what I asked. Is that parkland?
I think it was called community forest. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay, all right.
So
okay.
should we maybe be managing it? Like I noticed North Cowichan is managing theirs.
That's a good question. Would you mind taking that to Mr. Farquhar to get confirmation on that? Because I personally don't know any of that, but I could get that information and bring it back to you, or you could directly talk to Mr. Farquhar.
Yeah, it would be nice if the public knew they could, because I'm sure there's more than me asking. Madam Chair, on the Shawnigan Basin Society, I was just wondering if they walk away from everything, who is responsible for their debts?
Ooh, that's another good question. It's not us. They're a society unto their own. It's not, I wouldn't believe it would be our responsibility.
I remember years ago when this was formed that Mayor Kent was here and he wasn't going to let that society go without CVRD control. So I thought that if we have CVRD control over a society, then maybe they're responsible for it too.
There is none.
No control. So was.
Other than the flow-through funding, that's the only control.
So,
had.
so can we find out if they do any society within the CBRD, if they walk away with something and leave debts and they are a
I believe that would be
function?
with the province and the Society Act. I don't believe it would be with us. No responsibility, just a flow-through function.
Okay, I guess that'll give me something to research.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Moving on now to closed session, a motion that this meeting go into close to the public in accordance to the Community Charter, Part 4, Division 3, Section 90, subsection as noted in accordance with each agenda item. It's been moved. Second, all in favor, any opposed, motion's carried. 5 minutes to get into close.